Hey guys, before I start, I want to let this video know this is a personal opinion. This does not represent the United States Navy, military, or the United States Naval Academy in any shape or form. Guys, what if I told you Ceres was the absolute conviction of why the reason of God's existence, moreover Jesus Christ being God? You're probably looking at me like, what? How can that be? So, before we start off, we need to introduce the concept of what I'm going to be explaining, two variables here. So first, with Jesus Christ, more specifically, I want to talk about him dying on the cross and then essentially like defeating all sin and then coming back from it. More specifically, infinite sins. And I want to like talk about, in a sense, also how Ceres work. So Ceres, or more specifically, let's go back in math. Math has been proven time and time again. It acts as the absolute law of how things occur in this universe. You have one apple, and I give you another apple. 1 plus 1 equals 2. 1 apple plus 1 apple is equal to 2 apples. It's how things work. And in a sense, it's been proven even on the basis level, but also like more complex math, like calculus, for example, series. So what a series is essentially a sum of numbers that either converges or diverges to an infinite, negative, infinite, or a non-existent number value. What I wanted to, a non-existent number value being a number divided by 0. What makes series so interesting, though, is the idea of convergence. You're essentially having an infinite sum of numbers, right, converge to a single point. So why is this such an interesting concept? Well, if this concept wasn't in math, we would be on the belief that when you have an infinite thing, it leads to an infinite outcome, right? But with the idea of convergence, it's like you can take an infinite amount of something and equate it to one single thing. Now we go back to Jesus dying on the cross. His crucifixion on, in a sense, a spiritual level, was, in a sense, Jesus dying on that cross, taking an infinite amount of sin, and by that one action of death alone, he erases sin. And by laws of how series work, that's the only way that could, by this existing, that feasibly explains how that could happen, in a sense. And would it also, in a sense, wouldn't the creator of necessarily God himself, like as he's shown before with the apples example, like create a set of laws about how everything would happen? So if the Jesus dying on the cross, he erased all sins, actually happened, wouldn't there be a law behind it that actually explains it? Like, this feasibly makes so much sense. And then you also have the idea of absolute and conditional convergence, moreover, when it comes to belief. So conditional convergence is, in a sense, a series only converges at its absolute value, not when it's, whereas absolute value converges at all points. Think about the term like absolute, moreover. So there's also the idea of the alternating series. The alternating series states if a portion of that series, in a sense, is positive, it's decreasing, and its limit approaches as the value, the endpoint, the sum of terms approaches 0, it approaches the constant, then this number is, in a sense, it converges. Why is 0 so important? 0, in a sense, is basically, it's absolute nothingness. What did Jesus do on the cross? He got rid of sin itself. He reduced sin to nothing. The idea of what absolute makes it so important is what Jesus did was absolute. Like, from that point, if you believe in what happened on the cross, you sin no more. Like, all sin is erased when you go to heaven. And it's in the idea of like the alternating series. There's a specific point, whereas even after like we believe in Jesus, we're still sin. But if you have that select portion that believes in Jesus, it's positive. It's constantly decreasing the sin that happens in your life. And when you think about it in an infinite amount of time, it approaches 0. That's the exact point of what the gospel is supposed to do. Jesus is the ultimate positive. And in a sense, by believing in him through faith and faith alone, you see that your sin constantly like decreases. And through that infinite amount of time, it approaches zero. That's nuts. That's insane to think about. And then also about the idea of absolute and conditional convergence. Conditional is the point that only in the absolute that it could reach a converging point. So conditional, it also proves the concept of belief. If you don't go all into like the Lord, you don't have that absolute, you're not necessarily going to be able to explain. You're not going to be able to experience like this full love of Jesus. But if you go absolute, you take it all in, boom, it's like magic. Sin is erased. But it's not magic, it's math. And it's math created by the Lord Almighty Jesus. It's such a fire concept. I want to hear you guys talk about it so much more. But yeah, anyways, thanks for talking. Or thanks for listening. And I appreciate you all. I love you all. And I love to hear your comments.